This is Saskia, and this is Note to Self, your weekly dose of everything that's simply too long to text. Consider this your personal invitation into my inner circle, where I share my thoughts, feelings, and quiet reflections that usually live inside my Notes app. Thanks for joining me. Welcome to Note to Self, episode 2. Excited to be here. As you can see, I am in a new setup. I'm trying a few different spots in my new building, and this is what they call the library, but there's literally no books in here. There's like a few, but it's kind of hysterical. So I brought some little items from my own apartment to try and make it look a little bit more like me. As you can see, we have Louie the dog, most valuable player in my household. If you don't know the reference, you clearly didn't listen to season 1, but I'll forgive you. Louis was a little treasure I found in Nice last year. I was there for work and then tacked on a trip afterwards and saw my friend who was living there for the summer. My cousin was coincidentally there with her girlfriend, so we had a little girly night out, and we went to this really cute cocktail bar. Oh no, sorry, it was a wine bar. And they had a really small menu, and you just sat out on the street, and the woman had all these dog water pitchers, and every pitcher was a different dog. And we got given, I think it's a spaniel, and I love spaniels. And Louis, not this one, but got popped on our table, and I was obsessed, needed to have one. And then I looked over, and there was a dashie on another table, and then they had a dashie, the people who were eating, and I lost it. Anyways, Etsy research later found a seller in like the middle of France who had this dog. And I sent the dog to my friend who was in Nice for the summer, but then it didn't arrive in time. So then her family who live in Nice, we sent it to their store, and they had to like forward it to the US. It was a whole thing. Anyways, Louis got here in the end. He's an integral part of my household. He always sits on my table in my kitchen. Jeffrey was like, I suppose Louis is just out all the time now. I'm like, hell yeah, we're not putting him in the cupboard. That's so mean. So I don't actually use him. I just like to look at him. So he's my guest for the episode today. Anyways, excited to be back for episode 2. Hope you liked episode 1. I wanted to kind of kick things off with something that I did recently. So on Friday night, I went and saw this DJ I really like called Fred again. And he just started his New York residency on Friday night. So he's doing 6 shows in New York, 2 over the next 3 weekends. And Jeffrey and I went to the opening night. And it's part of his USB 002 tour. I think that's what he's calling it. And he just completed a 10-city tour end of last year where he was going to cities like Paris. And Paris was really cool because one of the DJs from the group Daft Punk, Thomas, he came out of retirement he played for the first time without his helmet. Those who are Daft Punk fans know that they always play with their helmets. And it was his first time playing in 24 years without the helmet. And Fred again brought him out. So he's been bringing out really cool artists to each city. He went to Mexico City, Madrid, SF, Toronto. There was 10 cities around the world. And each show, he would release a new track from his upcoming album. So it was this like really cool way to tease your album release and bringing people into the journey. And then every week he'd be like waiting for what song would be released. And these shows led up to the New York residency, which is happening now. And then he's going to London. And for those who don't know his music, he's a DJ, and he blends electronic music, house, garage, and pop. But I also find there's like elements of drum and bass, and he also has like some Latin house in there. He's a music producer, so lots of kind of unknown artists I've found, or maybe artists that aren't really known, at least where I live. He'll like remix and work with them to create new music, which is really cool. And I think it like brings recognition to other artists, which I really like. Anyways, I have been dying to see him, but have missed him multiple times. And we actually even didn't get tickets in the sale for this show because they sold out like immediately. So Jeffrey and I looked for resales online, and we were able to find some. But it was really cool. So what they've done for the New York residency is they've rented out this film studio in Queens. So it's not one of like the standard New York venues. And it made the sound quality so good because those film studios are soundproofed for obviously filming movies. So it was a great venue for something like that. It's big, but it didn't feel overwhelming. I get kind of overwhelmed when there's too many people. And I remember I went to a show, it was Polo and Pan, end of last year, and it was down in the Brooklyn Navy Yards, and it was just such a big venue. I felt very overwhelmed, and there was just a lot of people. And it never felt like too many people. You always had space to dance. And he almost created it felt like a cool club in a way. The lighting effects were crazy. I honestly wish I brought sunglasses because my eyes were killing me. The strobes were so intense. By the end, I was like, I need a break. But a few other things. The show started really early. It started at 8 p.m., which I love. We were home by 1 a.m., imagine. It started really early, and we had a really early night. It was a plus 24-hour show. No, so we're home by 1 p.m., and it was really cool. We walked in at 9, and Fred was opening for himself by playing with this artist we also love called Rummy. She was previously in the XX, and her solo album is really amazing. People should go listen to it. And then another artist that they work with, Hai, I think Haai. I didn't know them, but Rummy, Hai, and Fred had done kind of a song together a number of years ago, and this was their first time performing together again. So each show he's bringing on these like unique guests to open for him. But it was cool because he was also part of the opener. So it was really fun to walk in, and at that stage the crowd was like half the size, so we were just right in it. The show was entirely GA, so no VIP, no tiered access, which I think created like a much nicer, more chill vibe. There weren't any egos. It was just like a very nice environment. 'Cause sometimes I find like the VIP sections in that, you'll notice when you walk in, there's people that are like, where's the VIP line? It's like a whole fucking thing, and it's so stupid. I like the venues that just very much keep it GA and accessible for everyone. And I would say my takeaways from the show, honestly, just wow. Like, it truly was one of the best shows I've seen in New York. I think it was the energy of the crowd, the people were so into the music. Like, it wasn't people on their phones or people chatting, and I love to chat, but even I was like deeply into it, and it was really nice to just feel like everyone around you was kind of taken on this journey. He opened his set with this song called 10 Days, which is Jeffrey's favorite song, and then he transitioned into my fave song, which is Beto's Horns, which is a song he did with this Argentinian hip-hop duo, and they're called Cazarel and Paco Arnamoso, I think is what it is. Amoroso. There we go. It's Cazarel and Paco Amoroso. I wrote this down to make sure I got it right. So it is this like really like sexy like Latin house feel. And when it came on, I absolutely lost my goddamn mind. Jeffrey was like, I've never seen you like that before. And it was just the two of us. We weren't in like a big group or anything. So I'm just like jumping up and down, running around to the people behind us. I lost it. I was so hot and sweaty. I had to go take a break. I was like, we're only 2 songs in and I'm so tired. And I also like wasn't drinking that night. So I was like, we both went, like I was totally sober, and I was just like, I had a workout, man. It was kind of crazy. But the song just is so sexy. And I feel like it takes you back to like high school days when you'd be like grinding, and hysterically in Australia, we do not grind. I learned that visiting my cousins in the US when I was in high school and going to one of their high school parties. And I was like, what is this? It terrified me. I was like, what is this type of dancing? But now at 34 years old, finding my way back to it, it looks like it. And it was just this, the energy of it. It reminded me of being in Brazil with my friends. I went there a few years ago, and we were in Mexico City last year for New Year's, and I just love the Latin house, and it was such a fun energy to start the show. And I feel like the whole show, he really takes you on a journey. I find his music is really dirty at times, and it like vibrates through your whole body. It has this like undertone of like a sexual energy at times. And then it can be super light and poppy. And then he goes into this deep bass that just vibrates. And he often spoke to the crowd, which I really liked. And he was encouraging people to really be present. He said things like, look to your left, look to your right, like these are, you know, your family tonight. And encouraging people to make sure you had space to dance, and you don't need to take videos. Everyone got stickers put on their phones when they walked in. He's like, I have film crews and videographers all throughout the crowd to get videos that will be uploaded for you guys to share. And so much of it, like his ethos was around being present. And the roof had this like huge white drapery that kind of moved with the music. And I felt like, I was saying to Jeffrey afterwards, I was like, the whole experience felt very like church-like to me. It was like this like religious kind of experience with all these people. And he was really encouraging connection, presence, and I think joy. And on the downside, I would say a quarter of the people there ripped the stickers off their phones and were videoing. I almost like wish the security guards were just telling people not to do it, but it just wouldn't have been sustainable. There's too many people doing it, which I guess a quarter is not that bad in the grand scheme of things. And at first I was bothered by it, but I ultimately had to be like, ugh, I feel kind of sad for these people. Like, why do we all feel this need to like capture things instead of experiencing it, And like for me, it's all for social, right? It has to be. I mean, I even felt like the next day I wanted to post that I had gone, and I obviously didn't have anything, but I did what Fred had suggested, and I went and reposted one of his videos and left my commentary on that. And I don't know, I just think it's really awesome that artists are trying to encourage that. And look, a quarter out of a whole group is, I think, still pretty good stats, and we'll get there. And I was just thankful to be present with the people that were present around me. And then another thought that I had while at the show was that what I thought was really interesting. So his music can be very heavy, as I mentioned. And I think energetically that type of like heavy music can often build like a lot of tension in the crowd and almost like, I don't want to say aggressive, but sometimes it can be like an aggressive energy because you think you're getting this heavy music. Music elicits emotions. And I think sometimes it can elicit that. And we've seen that historically. I mean, if anyone's seen the documentary on Woodstock 99, that is the perfect example of just a curated lineup of very heavy, dark, angry music that elicited a awful scenario. It's so worth watching as a documentary on Netflix. And just like the culture behind it also was the culture of the time. But I think you have to be really careful as artists what you lead people to. And I found that what was interesting with him is, despite it being really heavy, I think he plays with a lot of lightness, and the energy I get from him is very light and playful, and it creates this actually like very safe environment. And I'm getting woo-woo here, but I've found after like seeing quite a lot of DJs and being really into house music culture generally, my close friend and I often talk about this, is that we feel like DJs really are channeling at times, and they're channeling like this energetic message that they're sharing with the crowd. And they play like a fiddle, man. Like that feeling you have when you're like building you up as like right before the beat's about to drop, like that is playing the crowd's energy. And you can see people just losing themselves in that in a beautiful way. And I think no wonder there's so many studies out there. I don't know if there's like official studies, because when I Googled it, I couldn't find one, but studies suggest that people who attend live music and raves regularly, it boosts their well-being, which potentially would add years to their life, which makes sense. Like if you're consistently doing something twice a month that's making you have this like feeling that allows you to let go and feel very present, be with people you love and smiling and dancing, of course it's going to help you in the long run. So I found that he is one of those DJs, now my first time seeing him, he's definitely tapped into something bigger, and what he was able to do to that crowd and how present everyone was, I was like very, very impressed. Like there was times it was really interesting when he was like calling out, like earlier in the show, he calls out the people around you. What I thought was cool is so often he would bring all the lights up in the room, and it sometimes would have like a red filter, other times it was like a white light, and it was cool because you were dancing, but you were actually seeing the people around you, which you don't always get to see. Sometimes it's very dark and you kind of feel it's more of an individual or just the group you're in. But I found in those moments when the lights came up, you could see everyone recognizing each other and smiling and taking in the experience together. And I feel like he does that purposely. And then there were moments where he'd really take you back down, and it was almost like a classical kind of medley. And it was like you saw all these couples connecting together and friends hugging, and it was just so beautiful. So a lot of joy. And I think my key takeaway is go to live music, go dance, let go. I love the joy I see at raves, like people just smiling at strangers and being with their friends. And I think it's by far the kindest energy I've found in New York. When I think about like my first 5 years here, I lived in Manhattan, and I mainly lived in downtown Manhattan. I always would just go to bars, maybe like little lounges and stuff to dance. And it was just so perfect for that time, but I wasn't really into live music as much. I loved music. I just like, tickets were expensive and I just didn't like know where to go kind of thing. And I think now having my second stint in New York and finding like venues that are more affordable, or like just being more exposed to DJs that I like, and probably having more, disposable income to afford different tickets, which is very lucky. But I also think there are venues out there that are cheaper as well. So that's why I note that too. It's just like changed how I experience New York so much. And I highly recommend people who live in the city to go to these things. There's types of events for everyone. Follow New York City Rave Girls. They're amazing, and they do a really good roundup every week of what raves are on in the city. And they give like markers of the type of music. And I think that it's a really good segue, or like an entry point if it's something that you're interested in. Or message me and I can help you. But yeah, so that was like my weekend, and where I have kind of been the last, 48 hours, because I feel like it took over my life. But what I really kind of wanted to dive into today was really around New Year's resolutions. And it's something that I've been thinking about a lot. And I don't know about you, but I always feel so overwhelmed this time of year, especially leading up to New Year's. And I think it's the pressure of New Year's resolutions. And this year I was just fed so many videos on my Instagram and TikTok of like different ceremonies to do for New Year's resolutions, or like different tasks or writing prompts or how to approach it. And I was just getting so overwhelmed, and I was noting them down. I was like, oh, I want to do that one, or I'm resonating with that one. And I was trying just to pick one. And like ultimately the one that I really wanted to do, I still haven't even done, because I just got so caught up with friends and family and celebrating. And I felt myself like really like resisting the urge to sit down. And it was writing a letter to myself that I would open in a year. And I started to like be like, who am I even doing this for? Because like, I think so often these resolutions get lost in like the something we have to do rather than something we want to do. And I started to reflect on why it needs to be now. The one thing I did do was 2 weeks prior to New Year's Day, my sister was doing this, and I like caught in a few days later after she had done it. It's meant to be that 2 weeks prior to New Year's Day, you sit down and think about everything you want to manifest in 2026. You write down 14 things and like rip them into like separate pieces of paper. And then you scrunch them up and you pop them in a little bag. And each night you reach into the bag and burn one of the pieces of paper. You don't read it. So I'd go outside, and I started this, I think, on like day 10. So like my first night I did 4. And this was kind of an example of already trying to be like, okay, it doesn't need to be perfect. Like just do it. At least it's something. And I would look up into the sky and like dream about, like think through the things that I'd written down, and like just feeling into that too, as if they've already happened. And you don't know what you're burning. So just keep it in mind. And then on New Year's Day, the last note that's left, so you should have one left, you open it up, and that's the one resolution that you should work on. The rest you leave up to the universe. So what I did is I actually wrote my resolutions in my notes app as well, so I could go back and see what I wrote down in like a year. And I could remember and reflect on it. And I really loved this practice because it felt far more like easy to complete. I think some of the things I was like, there's too many like steps. Like this seems basic enough that I can follow it. And I didn't even do it properly, because the last 2 days I missed. So I ended up burning my last 2 like a few days after New Year's Day. And again, this kind of was tying into like, okay, this whole like, it has to happen right now. It really doesn't. Like ultimately, you can start these things whenever you want. And this whole concept of needing to do it before the 1st of January is just so silly to me. And I'm just over this agenda that we've been pushing throughout December and now into January, and then you feel guilty about it. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. But funnily enough, the one that I was left with was get 100K listeners to my podcast, Note to Self. So that is the one I'm currently working on. So help me by sharing it with your friends. But yeah, so that's something that I'm now focusing on. And I think the idea of taking New Year's as a time to reflect is really lovely. And I think as humans, we like the whole January 1st date because of we like endings and beginnings, right? But as I mentioned, I think you can do this whenever it's right for you. This coincidentally kind of tied in well at the end of the year, but then the other thing that I wanted to do with the letter, I just never got to. And honestly, it might be something that I do in a month or maybe 2 months. Like I don't have to do it on January 1st. And I think what I'm leaning into is it's better just to do things when it feels right instead of when you should. And I feel myself more inclined to think about my year ahead when I've more settled into the year. And it's not the December, January hecticness. So I'm trying to get into the habit more of like check-ins rather than these like one overarching moment to reset. And I think the question is like, do we actually really need the new year to reset? No, not at all. And a colleague of mine, coincidentally, shared this really interesting quote on social that I had read. And I was like, wow, that really ties into what I'm thinking about right now. And it's by the author Sahil Bloom. And he says, the ultimate life hack is the ability to quickly reset and recover from a bad interaction, from a bad day, from a missed workout, from a poor decision. You can start over whenever you want. You can't always control what happened, but you can control how long you carry it. And I felt like that encompassed the entire framework that I was thinking about. And it kind of bleeds into some common New Year's resolutions that I was even trying. As I talk about how annoying all of this is, I was still trying to do my New Year's resolutions. We're all there, right? What can we do? Anyways, so for me, and I think these are some of the top ones, it was like not drinking, like dry January. That failed immediately. Being healthy and working out. I was like, what was the last one? And I think I wanted to kind of like recap on each of these and how I'm now approaching them because I've reframed them for myself. So dry January. I hate dry January. I don't know why I was even set on doing this. I think I was just like, it was New Year's Day and I was hungover and I was like, I need a break. I can't drink any more alcohol as I'm staring at my iPhone case that is literally olive martinis. And honestly, would love an olive martini, not gonna lie. Olive martini, what? No, dirty martini. Send help, man, send help. But it is with olives, so not wrong. Anyways, so I was really set on not drinking. And I honestly, this is something I come across all the time is like, I'm always like, I want to take a break from drinking. But then I start to feel like I'll be out with my girlfriends and I want to have a cocktail or something. I'm like, why am I like diminishing myself or holding myself back? Like, so I've been trying over the last few years to reframe my drinking habits. And I think I've done a pretty good job. Like I kind of stick to the more like 2-drink maximum. And that helps a lot because I often find by then, like I don't need another one. And sometimes you just go to order another one because you can, when in reality you don't really need to. And I think my partner, he doesn't drink, so that's also really helped in like probably lowering how much I used to drink. Being Australian, we all drink way too much. So that's been like an interesting one to reframe. And then the nights where I do have like a few 2 extra wines with the girls, like I don't get mad at myself for it because it's not a regular occurrence. And I think this year started with this like not going to drink in January. And I was at a work offsite this like last week that just passed, and my whole company's remote, so we rarely get together, but it was all of the marketing leads, and we came, half of them are in Europe, so they came to New York with the rest of the team. And we had like really long days and we had team dinners every night. And the first night we had booked this really cute cocktail bar to go to. And I sit down and I was like, yeah, I'm getting a drink. And I remember I felt so freaking guilty. And I texted Jeffrey and was like, is it bad that I'm getting a drink? And he replied going, I was like, tell me it's okay. And he's like, it's fine. Tell me it's okay that I haven't built the boxes yet. Because we'd ordered these boxes on Amazon and he was meant to build them. And I was like, it's okay, ... Anyways, so I had the cocktail and I was like, yeah, if you're going to do it, you can't feel bad about it. And I had to go back to the reframing of, it's not about like, I think cutting it out, because sometimes you can cut it out and then you just go straight back to the same habit. So I think for me, it was more reframing 1 or 2 cocktails, and it doesn't have to be this whole thing, and listening to my body. And in that moment, my body wanted a martini, and that's okay. And then other times when I really do not feel it, that's where I think I struggle to say no, because I have a rubber arm, and if other people around me are drinking, I will. And I think it's learning in that moment to still stick to what I really need and being okay with that. And I think that's what was really fun with the Fred Again concert on Friday night, is like, I wanted to go sober, and I was a bit nervous because like, it's like, usually I have a drink or something. And I actually was like good with it, and I had, a little espresso before I left, and it was really nice to like not feel like I needed something. So then let's move to the next one, which I think is working out. So I've always been someone who's been pretty consistent when it comes to working out, but the second half of the year, it's gone like so downhill. It's like the worst I've ever been. And I think it's like traveling a lot, I've been out of routine. My old apartment I used to have to bike to my gym, and I'd have to bike through downtown Brooklyn. And I know this is like first world problems, but it was just really intense biking through downtown Brooklyn with like all the cars and everyone just like beeping. And I just started to really avoid going to the gym. And I was just feeling so down on myself. So I think starting this year, I was like, okay, I'm in a new building. My gym is like literally on my floor, and it's a nice gym. There's no excuse not to go. So I was like, you should be going like 4 or 5 times a week. And some weeks I've been pretty good, and other weeks, like this week with the offside, I just have not been able to get myself there. And next week I'm going to be away for a month. So again, out of routine, it'll be hard to like kind of keep as consistent. But again, trying to reframe. And instead of putting these like rigid boundaries on ourselves, I think I've reframed it to like exercising 4 or 5 times a week. No, it's just moving my body every day. Whether it's going for a walk, doing some yoga at home, a Pilates class at home, anything, just something to keep my body active. And I used to have it in my head that like I wasn't working out unless I was like lifting weights or being really sweaty. And there's still a part of me that feels that, because I've just so consistently, my workouts have been weights for the last 10 years. And it's definitely still in the process of reframing this, where going for a walk is still something, and that's kind of how I'm approaching like the whole workout area, is moving body rather than needing these strict guidelines. And then finally, I think it's eating healthy. So normally I don't eat gluten or dairy, and I try and like limit sugar. It's not like I'm like super strict with it. It's just like I try and like avoid inflammatory foods because I can get like a mild form of psoriasis. And I've worked with a naturopath for years now. She lives in Sydney. Shout out to her. She's amazing. If you need a naturopath and you're in Australia, let me know. But she really helped me fix a lot of my gut issues, and I plan to do a whole podcast episode on that, but I need to make sure I get all my information right, because I'm bad at repeating what she's taught me. So I'll do that at some stage. But generally, I feel like my health is in a pretty good place because of what I've been able to accomplish with her. And I've really figured out foods that agree with me, things that trigger me. And, gluten and dairy, I'm not going to get sick. I just have high inflammation. So it just can sometimes create like a little rash. So the last few months of the year, though, I was eating whatever I wanted. And I think everyone, if you're not like, celiac and have severe problems, like enjoy what you want, eat what you want. And I think there's times that I just like didn't want to limit myself, and my body felt okay with it. Like I wasn't having any reactions. And I think just by the end of it, I was like, I just like need a reset, which I think a lot of people do in the new year. We all like splurge, as we should. So I'm back home, not eating gluten and dairy. And I've done this for a while now, that it's like pretty easy to do, to like kind of slip back into. But something that I found interesting that my esthetician shared on social, a shout out if you need a new good facialist in New York, let me know. Me just sharing Rex, but hit me up. And she was sharing that she's had a lot of clients come in so far in January that are having skin outbreaks and skin flare-ups. And I think people are on these health kicks, and she says that she found like a lot of her clients just are, went cold turkeys, literally, to like cold salads and smoothies, and that started to cause gut flare-ups, which causes skin kind of flare-ups. And she was sharing that at least where I am in New York and in winter climates right now, that your body really needs warm food, especially with, the environment being so cold. It's that idea of eating seasonally. So instead of like smoothies and salads, drinking homemade bone broth, teas, soups, slow cooking stews. And I think so often we think of like healthy, the things that we deem as healthy. And I'm not a nutritionist in the slightest, but I've learned a lot like working with my naturopath of like, also it's so dependent and unique to you. So things that may be like healthy for one person are not healthy for me based on what is going on in my gut at the time. But one thing that is, I think, a takeaway that we can all do that's really important is this eating seasonally. And in the winters, I tend to like slow cook more and eat warm foods and cooked vegetables. And I'm a big salad girly too, but like even putting more roast vegetables into your food or different like grains and things like that. And when you're going to buy your groceries, thinking about what vegetables are in season and trying to avoid vegetables that are not. And it's hard to do because obviously right now our supermarkets are just filled with everything we need. But you can do some like researching on what's in season and what isn't. And I still mix it up. Like I'm still always going to buy salads and things like that. But in terms of like root vegetables or fruits and things of that nature. And like I said, I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not a naturopath, and ultimately everyone's unique. But again, I think this goal and how I looked at it was more breaking the goal down into tangible lifestyle changes and not just like throwing yourself into this like drastic change where what people were doing is just making these drastic life changes and then their body was like, wait, what's happening? And I feel like it's more about, and I'll keep saying it, but reframing and how can I make small incremental changes to feel better overall. So this was kind of like my key takeaway from a lot of how I'm approaching these and what's worked for me. And look, if you want to try some of the things that I'm doing, go right ahead. But ultimately my advice is just to create space for yourself and tune in to what's right for you, because what's working for me may not work for you. And ultimately I think everything's a work in progress and things don't need to be finished. And you can start a New Year's resolution and it can change or it can pivot, and you don't need to just feel like, oh, I failed, so now I can't. It's like done. And I think that's how I was feeling with like, I drank last week, but maybe I'm not going to drink this week. Like, I think you take it day by day and tune into what you need in that moment. So this year, how I'm kind of breaking down my goals and my resolutions is I'm focusing more on body attunement. So just generally the practice of deeply listening to my body's internal signs. So that's like sensation, energy, and cues. And I think that helps understand your physical, emotional, and energetic needs. And it fosters self-awareness and better decision-making and improved well-being. That was like the definition of body attunement because I wanted to make sure I got that right. But really, I just think of it as taking moments of like, what do I need in this moment? And how can I give that to myself rather than forcing myself into these strict guidelines that I've based off a thing I feel like I need to do. And then the second part is, I think really it ties into the podcast one. So the one goal that I did have that I was to work on around getting 100K listeners to my podcast is I'm trying to break that down into smaller goals. So I actually am using ChatGPT to help me. And what you can do is you can input your goal. And you can say, if I wanted to achieve this over the next year, what are, steps I can take incrementally to help me get there? And it'll give you steps and tasks you can do. And, you can take with it what you will. I always kind of edit it and choose the ones that I think would work for me. But that feels way more achievable than just looking at this large overarching goal and having no idea where to start. And also what was achievable was because when I wrote down the 14 goals that I wanted and the rest I've kind of left up to the universe, and this was the one to work on, I feel a lot less pressure to need to be spreading my attention across everything and really just honing in on one. And then I think ultimately I do leave stuff up to the universe. And this is that final part of those other goals. Like, I'm just generally someone that operates from a place of abundance, and I really believe things will work out how they're meant to. And I think we look at life, there's peaks and troughs and positives and negatives, and I really try and avoid to frame things as a negative in a way. And there are things that happen to you that are not great. And I try and just think that this is just a moment, and there's something to learn from here, and something will come that is positive from this. That's how I live my life, and I think it's the one thing that keeps me going through the hard times, and surrendering to the energy, whatever it is, universe, for those other goals really does like take pressure off of what I feel like I want to achieve this year. And I don't know, there's something about like the way I've made it into these three kind of areas. It feels a lot lighter for the first time ever. But ultimately, I think, this whole episode really comes down to presence. And I think it's whether, you're dancing in a room with your friends or strangers, and, setting intentions on how to treat your body, or, general intentions. The common thread is just like learning how to listen to yourself, being present with music, being present with your body, being present where you actually are and not where you think you should be. We don't need January 1st to start again. You don't need perfection to make progress, and you don't need rigid rules to create a life that feels good. And I feel like we can reset as that writer said, after a bad day, a missed workout, a failed quotation marks goal. There's always moments throughout the year to reset, and I really think just being present is such a key takeaway across everything, because I felt that the presence I felt at the Fred Again concert is something that you can do even with your own body and trying to figure out what's right for you in that moment. So I think the advice is really just go dance, go have fun with your life, and like be kind to yourself. I'm telling myself that because I can be really hard on myself this time of year. And you see all these things on social media, and I feel like I'm comparing myself to other people that are, just so on top of everything they're doing, or at least that's what they're showing us on social. And they're writing down all their goals and doing their vision boards and having all these things. And I was like, I can't do it all, and what ultimately I did was, as we were saying, like practicing that embodiment and what was right for me in that moment. And I think what was right for me were the things that I did do and I'm continuing to do, and what I'm trying to share here. And I hope that maybe it can give a bit of solace to you, and to not feel like this is such an overwhelming time of year. And also, you can literally do this shit whenever you want. Like, we have to stop this idea of January 1st being this whole like reset and renew. Like, we can do it tomorrow if we wanted to. But if this resonated with you, please share a note to self with someone you think who would love it. Thank you. Help me grow my audience. It really means a lot to me. That's clearly the goal. And I think next week, what I wanted to talk about is I do these like monthly little ceremonies, and this is another thing that I dropped off doing and I want to get back into. And I have these things called oracle cards, and I feel like they are really fun, and they are like tarot cards. They're way easier to do though, so it's just, again, more manageable. But I wanted to share my little ceremony that I do and take you guys through it. Among other things, but I thought it would be a nice tie-in. So I will see you next week. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.